Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great podcast of Straight Talk Unleashed. And I'm going to say uncut because some of the things we're going to talk about is really going to be uncut. But before we jump into everything, I want to introduce a great panel and our colleagues. To my left, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Georgie, fire away.
Hello, I'm Georgie Marshall, and I am excited to be here today on the podcast to give you some Straight Talk Unleashed and Uncut, and really talk about our experience working in sales, management, leadership, our experiences and how we can empower you today and help you to be better.
All right. Further over, we have Cameron.
How you doing, everyone? My name is Cameron Marksman. I am great to be here today on Straight Talk Unleashed. And like I said, today we'll be discussing an array of topics on how to better an organization when it's coming to leadership and management, and what is the best foot to put forward.
Okay, so as we do this, guys, we're going to go into a topic today on the self-empowerment skill development group, and we're going to talk about not only the sinking ship of management versus the progressive sales of operational leadership. How to make the difference, and why is there a difference, and why there should be a difference with your company and instituting a leadership program compared to a management. Now, before we get into that, we're going to talk a little bit more about not only what our eyes see, and I want you to think about, too, what you see when you see management operating companies and why companies are not succeeding like they have in the past, but more companies are failing. And so is management the problem? Could it be that it's time to make a change? And with that, let's lead into that. Fire away, guys. What do you think? Is it time for management to change, or what are we looking at? What do we see with management that make us go, something got to happen?
Right. I'll go first. Management is not getting the results that is needed in the workplace. There is a challenge because they are not effective with people. They're untrained. They are brass, and they're just trying to kind of go out there and exert their title and exert who they are to the teams. And I'm not seeing that inspiration. I'm not seeing the intuition. I'm not even seeing the creativity from managers that need to be executed to have an effective growth strategy in a company.
Okay.
I completely agree. And I think right now with on this day and age right now with management and with organization, it's become more of a daycare centers and their babysitters. It's more just overseeing people and just managing people versus empowering people and be able to make them better than what they were the day before. And when you have that stagnation, that's where you have collapse, closures, and out of business for a lot of businesses.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about that. I like that you put it, let's talk a little bit more about the daycare. Now, first of all, I'm gonna say this. Guys, are we being hard on management? Are we really trying to, let's just put it, just cut. Are we trying to dog out management? Are we trying to, well, I mean, is that our goal?
No,
not at all.
So what are we really, what's the point? We really see what we see.
Right. We see a problem, and there should be a solution behind it. You can't say, okay, I see a problem, and then just act like you didn't see it and just keep doing business as usual. You have to make it.
You say we can't do that?
Because if you do it, it leads to destruction. It leads to closure. It leads to this, and people's lives ruined because a job that they were depending on is no longer there because management failed them.
You know, in all due respect, isn't that what's happening?
Absolutely.
It's exactly what's happening.
That's what's happening.
And it's been happening for a long time.
Yes.
I mean, I've been front level manager, and I've been the product of the upper level management, and now I'm raising Gen Z, and I see my daughter being managed by somebody completely inexperienced. And I'm just like, when is this cycle going to stop? Where we just try to break people's personalities and don't actually care about the actual person and what they're going through that day, but instead we just go through emotion that totally sabotages a person's whole emotional and life. I mean, managers at every level, especially upper level management, they do hold people's lives in their hands.
They do. And a lot of time, and I'll be quite frank and say it, a lot of managers are in positions where they're fully incompetent on doing that job. And then it reflects, it trickles downhill. And when you see that, it's almost like monkey see, monkey do. If you're seeing your team knowing that you're incompetent, you can't handle this position, and you're barking out orders, and the morale is sucked out the room, and then everyone it does not want to be there. They're not going to put your company first. The only thing they're going to be looking at when it's 5 o'clock, and that's what needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and companies are not addressing that. In fact, before they will address it, they're willing to let the ship sink. And we see that constantly. I think about it this way. You know, when I had, I remember when I had my 4 restaurants, okay, I didn't have the money that companies have to operate their businesses. And I remember when I made my mistakes, it's interesting because my dad showed me this. You know, we see a flurry of companies opening almost every day, major companies. We also see them going downhill every day. So what we learn, you can open up a company. That's not the problem. Keeping that company afloat, that's where great leadership, that's where strategic leadership comes into play. Why aren't companies looking for that instead of keep the trend going of bad management? And I'm just asking this question because basically that's what we see. And again, it's not to try to dog out an administrator or a executive administrator or operational manager. It just really calling the pot black because that's what we see. So why is that? What's going on with that? Why do we see companies doing that? I mean, from your perspective.
I think in my experience, sometimes it is that people don't want to invest in the time into their teams. Because it takes time to get to know people, right? It takes time to become culture-based and really make decisions together on how we need to move forward as a team. It takes time and money to invest into those hours, days sometimes, retreating and, you know, casting vision, as you would say, casting that vision.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I completely agree with you, Georgie, because a lot of times the key is how do you have your employees share the vision of that owner or manager of that company. And one of the biggest factors you see is there's a huge big disconnect. And the thing is, how do we bridge that gap? You know, and you made a lot of great points. You have to invest in your people, not just your company, but your people are your company as well. You know, and investment is key. What is the ROI on your employees? And that always falls between the cracks.
Earlier we talked about risk management. Okay, and all of this is saying one thing that she said earlier, and you just said it as well. You piggybacked on her point. The point is that I always think of a butterfly. How do a butterfly become a butterfly? It comes from what?
The cuckoo.
Wrestling.
Okay. Which comes from what? What's a magic word that people hate?
Metamorphosis?
Change.
Change, okay.
Change.
Yep. You could say that. Metamorphosis. It is. It's change. But a butterfly, imagine, now I know this is kind of absurd, but think about this. If a butterfly refused to go through the cocoon stage, would we have something so beautiful? We wouldn't have it, right? But companies will, you talked about earlier, invest. Now think about that from a standpoint. If you don't invest, if you don't take that risk, you never can get what? If you don't take a risk or invest, can you get gain?
No, you're not going to get the gain. You're not going to get the reward.
You're not going to get the reward at all. That's the word I was looking for. There is no reward if you don't take risks. And that's why I said earlier, then if you think of an entrepreneur, it is a risk taker. You didn't build the company from being safe. I call it playing not to lose, and also playing not to win. When you play not to lose, you plan not to win, because you're trying to be so safe. There is no safety. I think someone said this yesterday. I was listening to a video, and he said that, I'm trying to think about it. I'm going to go past it for a second because I got to get it down before I recite it. But it had to do with when we try to block change, when we try to block risk, when we try to block risk. And one of the things he said was how we cannot see a reward. There is no reward without risk. It just doesn't happen. There is no reward without risk. And so what's the answer? And we talked earlier about operational leadership.
Yes.
Operational leadership. Why haven't operational leadership? Leadership is slowly, over the last couple of years, become a buzzword. Mm-hmm. But operational leadership, people have not talked about that much, about how to make a change. And if you don't spend money, if you don't invest the money, you compare it to, as we talked earlier about your return on your investment, how much money are you losing right now? How much money will you lose? How much money are you losing to shut down several stores, several of your offices? Okay, how much money are you losing? Because you're hoping that this old system that's sinking is going to resurrect your company. Is that possible? Does that make sense?
No, I think it's the definition of insanity. Doing something over and over and expecting something different.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you really have to dig into that day-to-day tactical task that you're asking that frontline per se to do. Like, I've worked in sales for 30 years, and I remember when I worked in the call center, and I built my own team, and they got caught up on this call, and that sale has to get closed. Can that manager lead this team to up those sales? If I can pick that phone on and read that script and close that deal, you gain morale.
That's
and
right.
They trust you.
Yes.
So they're going to tell you if there's issues, if there's problems, if there's concerns. And I think sometimes you have these huge gaps between what is happening at the top versus what's happening at the bottom. And so we have to have that conversation, usually starting from the top and working our way down, to make sure that we implement culture, implement and are aware of what's actually affecting the bottom line.
Well, you said it right there, as we slowly get ready to wrap this up.
Yeah.
You said it right there. What happens on the bottom? As my dad always said, crap runs downhill. Okay, crap runs downhill, and we've seen it for a long time. And like I said, guys, this is uncut. We're going to speak what we see. We really, and I think everybody see this, but they won't say anything. They will allow themselves to be out of a job, because if you shut down several stores, your store is going to be next.
Yes.
Okay, so
and the writing is on the wall.
The writing is always on the wall. And so why do people not say nothing? Because sometimes what managers do, well, I just go over to this company. They got several places going. And people are hoping, instead of putting in a system that's working, because it's time for a change. And that's what we're going to get into next podcast. We're going to talk about what is operational leadership, and why is operational leadership so far advanced compared to management? What are they doing different? Why is managers have stagnated? Can you take a manager and turn him into, or her into, a leader? Can that be done? Yes, no, yes, no?
It depends on the. It depends on the individual.
And we're going to talk about that.
It depends on their will.
Yeah.
Like, leadership is hard. It's hard work to decide I'm going to be a leader
Because
from just a do.
Exactly, and the leader, what drives them is vision. They have to have a vision first.
It's a surprising answer. And the answer, and we're going to go into it on the next podcast, but the answer is a resolving no. Now, you may say, well, what? You can't do that, because here's why. It's one of the biggest reasons. If you take a manager who's been doing something wrong, how many years? 3 or 4, 5 or 6, 7, 8,
Plus
9
years,
years.
4.
They've been managing. They're used to managing. Is it easy to break habits?
No.
Okay. If you got a person, it's hard enough for a person who's 20, 19, 25 to break habits. What about a person who's 30, 40, 50, 60s, 70s?
That's going to be almost next to hard to do so.
Because they've been doing it wrong. When you've been going in the wrong direction so long,
Right.
what do you have a tendency to do? Revert.
Right.
If you can
Back.
train, even if you train that person,
It goes back to the old habits.
you're going to go back to what
It's
you
like
was
the
doing.
old adage say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Right. Especially if they don't want to be taught.
That's true.
Yeah. And some people would do it to save their job. I've seen it so many times. They'll go into, they'll like, train me to be a leader to save their jobs. But they don't change what's inside. See, leadership is for the most part, leadership comes from, it's a gift. You already have it. Great leaders, you can't just magically just go in. You either have to train somebody from an early stage before and find a way to get rid of bad habits. Because bad habits, we all can remember bad habits. If you smoke for a long time, it's hard to quit smoking.
Sure.
Yeah, if you've done something wrong, if you've been going in the wrong direction so long, you can't just go, you know
Well,
what?
it is possible, though.
Huh?
It is possible.
Well, anything's possible.
Anything's possible.
It has to do with, it's individualized. It's individualized.
It is individual.
And so
I
do you
agree
want to
with that.
waste time from a person who, and then because leadership is easily spotted. If a person is not used to leading, you can't just take them and say, okay, you can't take a manager and say, hey, tomorrow we're going to lead. And so the right training has to come in place with the right person.
So we have to assess each person.
You got it 100%.
Yeah, I
Yes,
mean,
that's
You got it
and we have to
100%.
decide, do they
It's
have
an
the
assessment.
potential?
Yes.
And also, and if companies are looking for leaders,
Yeah.
the hiring process have to be an assessment
Mm-hmm.
to weed out and see which has leader mindset.
Because sometimes you have leaders who are forced to be a manager, and they're sitting in there and they want to lead, but their company won't allow them to lead.
They're handcuffed.
They're handcuffed, yeah. And those are the ones who want to say something, but they can't. And so you have those. And so
Right.
you can do that from that standpoint, but the majority, most of the time, you have to start with someone who have not been scarred from bad management, because it is a scar. So with that, guys, any last points? We got 2 minutes.
It's a scar.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
I
like
would
that. I like
love
that
to
too.
take a little bit further into that scar that comes from bad management and management being and reigning over your organization. And those are the things that we're here for, you know, to help heal some
And
of these broken wounds.
I will even put it as, it's like a locust. What locusts do? They go out and destroy.
Yeah.
So if you as a manager and you're taught those bad habits, and then you up and pick up and go somewhere else, now you're bringing those habits over to that new
Right.
organization and
Right.
rinse and repeat. And now that organization, it has the same folds in the downward position.
Yeah. And guys, I'm glad we got a chance to talk about this, because Straight Talk Unleashed, next week, I want to hit on what can we do. I want to show if you're an entrepreneur, focus in on what we talked about. This, again, not a way to bet. We're not trying to bash or put down any management or get anybody fired. This is all about the truth about a company. If you got an organization, you can't wait around until the boat sinks altogether. It's too late then. You got to recognize really what is the cause of, if there's a hole in the boat, you got to start fixing that hole in the boat. And if that hole came from an individual, then you got to look at, okay, why does this individual keep puncturing holes in my boat and causing it to sink? And that's what an organization has to do. You have to look at every aspect of your team. And if you have a bad team, it's time to restructure. And that's just another way of saying an assessment. Do an assessment, or call us out to do an assessment of your organization. Give us an opportunity to show you, to demonstrate that. It don't cost you much, not too much, but give us a call and let us come in to give you an idea of what it is that's causing your management team not to progress. Again, thank you. We'll catch you on the next Straight Talk Unleashed. Thank you, guys.
Right.
See you.